that in mind so we can get out at a normal time. We're going to start with roll call. A.C. Welch. Here. Reverend President Becker. Here. Diva Murphy. DPSA Tombu. Treasurer Kalani. Here. A.T. Weber. Here. H. Chair Satchel. Here. Services Coordinator to the Tumwa. Here. Council Chair Christensen. Here. Doc Gumigiala. Senator Stallings. Here. Senator Christian. Here. Senator Dodimi. Senator De Vega. Here. Senator Nelson. Here. Senator Kankyo. Here. Senator Jones. Here. Senator Mendel. Here. Zernig. Here. Nieto. Here. Goldauer. Here. Substitute? Yeah. Cool. McDowell. Here. Teaser. Here. Pedro Santa. Collinger. Here. Abeling. Aye. Adhikari. Here. Goswami. Here. Monteforte. Gould. Here. Coleman. DeRoche. Here. Preston. Snodgrass. Here. No. Blackstone. Cheslak. Haddock. Downey. Here. All right. Time to vote on the approval.
One personal privilege. I think there might be an issue with the liquor because Senator Donovan isn't here, but it's Nigeria.
I sent her in the advance in case she was late. And I
Oh, thank you. Time to vote on the approval of the minutes. The polls are now open. A is in favor, B is opposed, C is abstaining. Let's approve last Senate meeting so we can start the Senate. We are looking for the magic number of
18.
18.
Yes.
17. We are looking for one more. Please press Carlos. Happy birthday!
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, now we're looking for 18 because Carlos is here. Someone click their clicker. I thank you. Polls are now closed, and with everyone saying nice and happy yes. So let's move on to public comments, announcements, and additional events. You, Grinnell again.
The SGA exec-elects will be looking to appoint an election board chair very soon, next Senate. So we wanted to extend this invite to senators especially. Note that, when you're the election board chair, you can't run in an election. But having been a senator and reflecting on my own time, it's an opportunity I wish I would have considered more because I think that with the right person in it, it can really have a lot of influence in the way that SGA as an organization works. So if you're interested, please let me know. If you're not a senator and you're in here and you're interested in how we elect our representatives that come in here, please let me know. We'll be back to you next week.
Thank you very much, Senator Swami.
So I'm sure all of you heard there were these terrible bombings in Sri Lanka, and so there's a fundraiser happening for that. It's hosted by the South Asian Student Organization in association with 4 other students who will be joining us. So on May 1st at 8 p.m. in JRC 209, they'll have a fundraiser. They'll have food. They'll talk about what happened and the NGO that they'll be donating for, they're collecting for, and then donating to. So and they'll also be tabling Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, for dinner, just spread the word. So yeah, May 1st, 8 p.m. JRC 209.
Thank you very much. All right, if we, AC Welch.
Next week we're in 101. We will have food. It's our last Senate. TBD with food, maybe Pizza Ranch. And oh my God, okay, so there's an event in there before them, and it has circular tables, so we will again have circular tables. So about that.
DPSA Tombu? We can come back. You ready?
Okay, Ramadan is starting on Sunday. If you would like to observe, go to the CRSSJ at 12 p.m. on on Tuesday. And for more information on breaking the car and doing it.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry that we don't have a mic in here. We're going to do our best to remain accessible. And also that information will be in the mini minutes. Yeah, thank you very much.
And guys, just a reminder, because we don't have mics in here, please project so the camera can pick it up better. In 101, there's a speaker that projects the mics that's like right above the camera, so the audio is always pretty good, but it's just not as equal in here.
Yes, yes. Are there any of the treasurer on? Sorry.
Just want to give a quick shout out to Amanda, Joshua, and Erica. This weekend, because of the new funding policies, was the last weekend of SGA funding committees giving out money for the semester. So just good work on all three of them this year for really holding down the fort and getting some good stuff done.
Thank you very much. Senator Representative. This is a follow-up question. So will committees not be meeting for the rest of the semester?
Yeah, committees, or at least ACE and SBC services, are done for the semester because of the fact, like, we have this 2 weeks policy, and 2 weeks after next Sunday is the Sunday after finals week, at which point we can no longer provide funding.
Thank you. Senator Bollinger.
I was just wondering what everyone's opinion was about the polenta bar from, sorry, it's in my announcements, but I was just wondering, dining services was interested in seeing if it would be even popular to like be on the 6-week rotating cycle. Any of your opinions would be appreciated. Yeah, also please tell people there are going to be Oreos. Well, there are Oreos and Cheez-Its in the grill, big stuff. So if you're interested in that, please do that. Also, the recipe submission site is up, so tell your constituents. Thank you.
Yes, so my announcement is just about, we have our new industrial composting system, and the bins are located outside Smith, Dibble, and then in the South Loja between Loose and the one after Loose, and then there's also one in the Kershaw recycling room. And you can put all your biodegradable items in.
Gianna has an announcement, but she's not here, so just make sure you read over that. And the main point of it is that miscommunication is bad, so make sure your mini minutes are accurate. Now we can move on to agenda item 4, which are the ACE budgets. Pardon?
I have a follow-up question for you, Rachel. I haven't seen one by the grill. Is there?
Yeah, so we're in the process of ordering this. So
Okay.
this is different than the other bins that looks like the trash cans that are already.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, moving on to ACE budgets.
All right, so we started with the Chinese and Japanese at SCPC. They're having a ramen study break on the Monday of finals week. So they requested $192 and they got that to go for ramen. They'll have all different types. The next was for a blind publication release. They're just gonna have little snacks outside the grill on, I think it's the same day.
May 13th.
May 13th, yeah, that Monday of finals week. So it was just like $128. Then they're gonna have a ship event with all different types of meats and hot dogs and things like that. And I think they have vegan options too. It was like problems with the funding process. They didn't know that it had to be like 2 weeks in advance. It was supposed to be this Sunday, but it's actually going to be next Sunday because, yeah, or not this Sunday. The week after, the week right before finals, Sunday right before finals. So yeah, and then lastly, the most, like not the most important, but the biggest budget was Spring Waltz, which is going to have to get a new Senate approval, so, which was $4,480.
Okay, we have the Wolves budget pulled up. We do not have the Wolves budget pulled up. I have the Wolves budget, but I
Is it an email chain?
can send it to you.
Can someone, whoever has it, send it to the email chain?
You can, you have a spreadsheet. Okay, so for spring walks this year, it's just gonna be in Harris because, the golf course was booked and me and Khadijah went to Hotel Grinnell and tried to get that. But, after we like talked everything through and like we worked everything out, they actually reached back out to us like right after saying, oh, we were looking at the wrong date, it's actually been full this whole time. So, that's kind of disappointing, but, we don't really have any other options because Maine is also booked that night for the Grinnellian as a one location, and they will let you like book the same thing, just book for something else, even if you might not be there. So, yeah, so for catering from Relish, that's gonna be $3,500. They're gonna have, it's gonna be like vegan options and gluten-free options too. It's gonna be the mini beef, Wellington, beef steak, egg frying, vegetable trays, fruit trays, hummus, pita chips, and maki bowls. And so, we're also gonna add, to try to get like dining, catering involved, we're gonna have catering do the desserts and the drinks. So that'll probably be a little bit more. But we're gonna look into that. We're also gonna have a photo booth, and so the theme for the walks is gonna be like under the stars, and then it's gonna be like Star Wars, because it's on May 4th. So all these decorations are star themed, decor, balloons, confetti. So we're gonna try to make it look less as like, not like Harris basically. We're trying to like outdo it as far as decorations and make it look as pretty as possible, even though we had to set up for Harris. Yeah, that's really it. It's just like decorations and yeah.
Alright, are there any comments or questions? Senator Zernick? I just want to comment that in committee today, we talked about this a lot, and I want to say, like, I know Eric was talking about it in the sense that, like, we have to sell Harris, but I think we've done a really wonderful job planning it. I think it's going to be really beautiful. And, like, I just, like, claps for Erica, because I know Thank you. Senator Calder?
I was wondering if you like reached out to Siamala just about, or like, I guess Amanda as well, about like extra stuff from Winter Waltz, because I know that it seemed like there were some proposals or anything like that.
We like reached out. I don't think it like went through yet, but like we needed to submit a budget before we could like look at it. So we just kind of just like a little bit behind. But their thing was like completely different anyway, so I don't know how much of the same stuff they would have.
Are there any other comments or questions regarding the budget? If not, we can just move to voting on it. Senator Zernick?
Just one other thing, again, applauding Erica, but also like in terms of voting, I think it's important to note that the bulk of this budget is catering and the photo booth, both of which I think are critical and the most important parts. And also in planning this, again, I think Erica's done a great job in that, like all the extra decorations and stuff are pretty light in terms of funding. Not super expensive.
Thank you. Vice Chair Satchel, do you have anything left to add? No. Seeing that there are no comments left, we can move into voting on this. So the polls are open. A's in favor, B's opposed, C's abstaining, and this is a vote on approving the budget for spring waltz. You can say one more, so make sure you click. We're going to close it at 20 seconds.
One more.
One more. All right, we're closed.
And a reminder, we can see in post who has not voted.
With 15 in favor and 1 abstention, that budget passes. Thank you very much. Are there any other A's budgets?
I think that was the last one.
Okay, now moving on to SPC and services.
3 budgets quinceañera is happening Saturday, May 4th. Then Sasso is having a whole week cultural celebration. And then finally, Beekeeping Club during the winter, 2 of their hives died, so they just wanted to If you scroll down to projections, turns out we're back on track. And we have underspent as committees done, unless emergency budgets roll through, we're good.
Cool. Any thoughts, questions? Central Zoning?
I know there's no services budgets here that I saw, but can you see, or like how much did you underspend services just out of your?
I can send you an exact number, but you want to know
An estimate is solid.
2,000 probably.
Anything else? Seeing none, are you good to move on? Reverend Becker?
To the point of understanding the services budget, this is something that I've been tossing around this semester, but I think in a proposal that I've submitted to reform, but I think the separation of services from SBC, for those who will continue to be on campus and involved in student government in the future, I think is essential to the continuation of student government's commitment to community service and outreach. I think putting a group together so as to intentionally spend SGA's funds in a direction that benefits the surrounding communities, I think would be a beneficial approach to kind of alleviate the underspending that committee has traditionally done.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we can now move on from the budgets and go on to number 6, which is a vote on the approval of the amendment to Article 2 of the SGA Constitution. So it is on the screen. Who is presenting this?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. This was what came back from reform. I think in order to be consistent with our internal and external messaging, the usage of codes is like an antiquated concept, and I think we could perform the same actions with they as gender-neutral pronouns. The committee wished to keep those in, so I guess we will keep those in. I think the most important part. Nope, never mind. No, I was reading the old one. I apologize. I'm happy that we have they, them, theirs as our gender concepts. But yeah, no, so I think the big thing here is that I wanted to make sure that SGA had a mission in its constitution, one that we can like publicly display, and I think that is contained within Article 2. Additionally, there's restructuring in the order in which we present our mission that I think is much more in line with the way in which we conduct our operations, being that SGA's primary responsibility is to represent the student body and not necessarily allocate funds, so that is something that is also important, something that is acknowledged in our mission statement. And I think the separation of that singular mission statement and our statements regarding accessibility and inclusivity of both the organization and our governing documents, I think is essential. So I think this is something that has not changed since at least 2003, and I think is an important step forward for the efficaciousness of this organization. And I would hope that you all vote yes. I'm also willing to take any questions, if any other questions before I do the vote.
Any questions?
And so this is also a constitutional referendum, being that it's an amendment to the Constitution. I think one thing that I am like agreeable to is if there are constitutional changes over the summer, lumping this change into constitutional changes that may occur over the summer. Or we could just put out a constitutional referendum now. The 20% barrier, I think, is something we could do fairly easily.
Treasurer O'Connor?
We'd have to do it now. Constitutional changes that pass have to be voted on by the student body, if I'm not mistaken, within the semester in which they are passed by the Senate. So we would have to have it now.
So what, sorry, may I address Treasurer O'Connor?
Go for it.
What would happen in the case in which we present a constitutional change next week?
If it was approved by the Senate, it would have to be approved by the student body, or voted on by the student body in this semester.
So we could pass the change next week and then vote on it during the week of finals?
Theoretically, it would have to be done during that period of time, otherwise the vote would be void. At least that's my understanding of our policies regarding constitutional referendum.
I'm leaping to conclusions here, I apologize. This will be discussed in reform committee this week. and we'll handle the logistics if this passes. I'm speaking as though it does. So we'll wait to see how the vote goes and then go from that level.
Do we have any questions? Senator Ely?
Hi, it's just a really minor point. I noticed that you're removing a phrase that indicates that you represent students to particular people, college administration and faculty, and just making it more general. Can I ask what the reason was behind that?
Yep. And if this was your duty.
I think the thinking behind that was that there are times when the Student Government Association is called upon to represent students beyond just the administration and the faculty, including to prospective students and people that are not within the Grinnell community. I recall last year that Summer White was interviewed by the Daily Tar Heel, which is the UNC school paper. And so we wanted to make it more in line with the fact that sometimes members of the organization are called upon to be representative of the student body even more than just our internal community.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I actually, so this is also, this is actually a lot more general. Is this the only major change the reform committee is going to propose before the end of the semester? Can anyone answer that? Because if so, is there any concern that submitting a bunch of votes to the student body could result in some degree of exhaustion over voting on multiple changes like this, which might be better lumped into one bigger document?
Yeah. So this is.
No, go for it.
This is something. This is what I was alluding to earlier. I know that me, Dylan, and Quinn just submitted a amendment to JROC to reform committee to discuss that we could then discuss next Sunday. Just kind of clarifying some of the changes we've discussed this year. But I think in the event that this passes, I think we'll discuss it in reform on Thursday. I imagine there will be at least one more that's brought forth next Sunday. In which case we'll try and put out something the following Monday to allow for the following 2 weeks to reach the 20% threshold, which I think we can do. So I think in the event that this passes, I imagine we would wait until a week from tomorrow to send out a student referendum so that we kind of lump everything together. I don't think it'll be many things, but I think it'll be more than just this.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, President Becker, do you have anything left to add? Do I hear a motion?
I would like a motion for your question.
Seconded by AC Welch. All right, polls are open. This is to vote on the approval of the amendment to Article 2 of SGA the SGA Constitution. A is in favor, B is opposed, C is abstaining.
Point of information.
Yeah.
Is to clarify for everyone, is a portion of approving this or not approving this the subsequent renumbering of articles after Article 2 to be in line with this, or are we just to be clear, are we authorizing a potential, this body is authorizing the change of all the other articles to be articles like N+1 because of the addition of an article in between Articles 2 and 3 as it stands now?
So you mean the number?
Yes, because it's not explicitly written on this document, and I want to be clear that people understand that that is an aspect of the changes that would need to be made.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, we have hit the magic number. The polls are now closed, and with 17 in favor and 1 abstention, that vote passes. Thank you all, and thank you, Quinn, for that clarification. Next, we can move on to agenda item number 7, which is a vote on the approval of the changes to Article B, which is Article 10, Article 5, Section 2, subsection F of the SGA bylaws. It is on the screen. Who is presenting this? President Becker.
So I propose that we discuss this next week. So for background on this, and I think this will play into a discussion we'll have later on Article 5. I was doing institutional research over spring break, and I found this resolution that was brought before joint board in 2007 for an environmental coordinator. And
point of order, I think this is the Green Fund resolution. No.
This is the Green Fund resolution?
No, the Article 5 one is the one that was brought, right? Yes. Oh, so we're out of order. Oh.
Okay. Is this also on the document?
This is on the agenda later.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's.
Wait,
There are two sustainable. It's called Green Fund Resolution.
Yes.
Okay, so if we're talking about this one, this is something that came out of Green Fund. It's a resolution to make a change to the bylaws. Just in addition, it's the highlighted section you see on the screen in yellow. Basically, section F talks about restrictions placed on types of student activities that are funded. And so we wanted to add requests for environmentally unsustainable items as determined by the Green Fund Committee, where the purchase of more sustainable alternatives is feasible. So on the second page, which is not a part of the resolution itself, but it's kind of just like for your reference, is a list of things that Green Fund came up with that is dynamic and can change throughout the years. That committee chairs can kind of refer to when they're considering what items are deemed unsustainable, environmentally unsustainable by Green Fund, and some alternatives that they can use and fund instead. So this is just a resolution to kind of encourage sustainability as an institutional practice and put it in our bylaws. And so I can take questions. Rachel can also take questions.
Point of personal privilege, I don't think anyone can see that. I know I personally can't, so maybe
Sorry,
you want to
guys.
select a page. It's okay.
Which one do you guys want to see? Which one should I?
First one.
You should all have the document too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any questions for Green Fund Chair Snodgrass or Senator Jones? President Becker?
Yeah, so I think this is something I'm also trying to get at with what we will look at later with the introduction of the potential environmental sustainability coordinator. I completely agree with the sentiment behind this resolution. I think that a more sustainable mindset should be applied to all the facets in which we spend money, not just to be relegated to the Green Fund Committee. I feel a little uncomfortable with putting this in the bylaws as opposed to a treasurer's office policy, if not just the inclusion of what is currently the Green Fund co-chair, what I will eventually propose as being the Student Environmental and Sustainability Coordinator, as just having that voice on ACE and SBC in order to ensure that we are thinking about things sustainably. I think the way this is currently phrased leads me to believe that all funding made by the treasurer's office is subject to the approval of the Green Fund Committee, which I think is I don't know, which I like. Does that mean the Green Fund Committee is the one who determines whether or not things are environmentally sustainable or unsustainable, and then can then prevent funding by placing the onus on the committees and the treasurer's office? I feel like this is like kind of a circumnavigation of our like traditional operations. I don't know.
Senator Jones? So when we talked about this in the form, we changed the wording around a little bit. And I want to clarify that the as determined by the Green Fund Committee it's a definitional, not an operational clause. So talking about when we say environmentally unsustainable items, that's too vague to have in our bylaws, I think, or like it doesn't actually say. So the as determined by the Green Fund Committee is in order to define environmentally unsustainable items. And so that's this document on the second page, Addie, if you could scroll. This document on the second page that has these items, or my understanding is that these items, which also in the second column have substitutes available, are items that fall within that definition.
I saw 3 hands raised. President Becker, President-elect Logan, and Treasurer Orlani.
So the question that I have then is that the line, if we fast forward like a year or two from now, suppose this passes now, this second document will not be provided when people are analyzing the bylaws as written. I think this document is fantastic. I think this is something that Gwen and I discussed during IAC previously this semester, as well as last semester, because we had students come forward who were presenting a budget who asked for more expensive bowls, and we were like, why are they more expensive? Is it because they're biodegradable? And I was like, this is awesome. Like, we need this voice in our funding committees. I think my concern is that the way in which it is currently written has a greater scope than that which this document provides, and I think I am concerned about, like, in the future, the way in which this line will be interpreted without the context of this and, like, its original intention. I fear that, like, the current verbiage is, like, deferring from that of its, like, intention as I've proposed.
And then President-elect Logan.
I was just going to echo what President Becker said in terms of concerns around what this means for treasurer's office being kind of like the superseding voice on what is and isn't funded. Again, like I completely also agree with the spirit of it, but I have a little bit of experience with complicated bylaw language, and I can really imagine this in a few years, like there being a kerfluffle that has to like quickly turn into a campus-wide thing when it's like a technicality. Yeah, so I just want to echo that concern.
Treasurer Kalani?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo the concern about the language ambiguities. Especially for me, in addition to what's already been raised, the clause about alternatives being feasible or not, and who's the arbiter of if it's a feasible reallocation in order to provide a more sustainable funding or a more stable product option. Additionally, like I would echo the sentiments of, like I understand, as Senator Zernick said, this would be definitional rather than operational. But again, having a document outside of our governing documents that is basically referred to by a specific line in a section of the bylaws that I know that the Treasurer's Office takes very, very like to heart. And that like these are like there are 3 things on this project as it stands now, and all of them are like those are our go-to like our initial checklist on whether or not we're thinking about something can or cannot be purchased. And I think that this is just a little bit vague, especially for this section. I think it really might fit well under a different section, potentially regarding the way that committees are structured, especially the Green Fund Committee in terms of its role in helping SGA decide what things we should and shouldn't be buying. Additionally, I think that any such proposal which puts power like that in the hands of the Green Fund Committee would necessitate a deep reevaluation of the way that the Green Fund Committee operates, because we would be so substantially increasing its scope and powers in terms of its ability to act within the Student Government Association. And frankly, I'd be very uncomfortable keeping the way that the committee operates as it is now with this being in their purview, because of the fact that like it is 2 people determining the scope of that committee, and you have to apply ahead of time, and it's very like closed off, and it would be setting policy that impacts everything that the Student Government Association does in terms of the allocation of student funds.
Senator Stallings?
So I may like kind of be misguided here, and I can't say that I'm like, I only recently become extremely involved in like learning about climate change and things like that because a lot of reasons. But is it necessarily bad that the Green Fund would kind of be the like this kind of overarching thing, or at least something that has more impact in how SGA operates? Like I understand that perhaps this would like maybe change some dynamics, especially with funding, but like I think that everything that SGA funds should be environmentally like conscious. Absolutely, 100%, absolutely. So I don't really understand why this is a problem. Maybe there's someone who can explain that.
President Becker?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you, Karen. I think this is something that I've discussed with like various circles within student government as well. Like I said, this was brought to our attention in IAC. I can't remember if it was this semester or last semester. That's something I completely agree with. And again, like I super agree with the sentiment here. I think like I'm more concerned with just like neither like the Green Fund co-chair nor the assistant treasurer are like elected positions, and then placing on them the onus of like all funding decisions made by the organization, I think like is the best structural approach. But I think a more sustainable mindset should be applied to the ways in which we expend our funding. And so I think integrating this as like a treasurer's office policy, I think is something that is super doable, something that is very continuous, and like records they like have maintained like consistently for many, many years. And additionally, like a resolution that I will discuss that we will then refine for next week, that like introduces the possibility of a student environmental sustainability coordinator, which would be a position that would bring that mindset to all ways in which SGA expends funds. Because I agree that when possible we should. I think my only concern then is that obviously sustainable products are going to be more expensive, and SGA has a finite amount of funds which we can expend, and I think we'll have to have a greater discussion about the ways in which we apply those funds. But I also don't want our environmental sustainability mindset to be limited by our funding possibilities. I think like we should take a preemptive approach in that direction. But yeah, I think there should be a greater say. I think it should not be. I think that say should not be the be all end all of our funding operations.
We're gonna go AC Welch, BPSA Tombu, zoning, and Jones.
So I don't see this as really as taking any power from the treasurers or necessarily giving a lot of power to Green Fund. I see it as, like as Quinn mentioned, we have subsection F lays out 3 things right now that SGA can't fund, including like personal items and things like that. And it's my understanding that the treasurers discern whether or not something is for private use or something is for a candidate for office or for a fundraising activity, which are the 3 things that aren't allowed. So I don't know, I see this as a definition of, we have A, B, and C definitions right now, and the treasurer determines when they're applicable. This is like a deep definition of something we would not fund, or when we would not fund it, and then the treasurer would still determine when that's not appropriate.
BPSA Tombu?
I like the idea of the Green Fund chairs sitting on committees so that, committees, period. Sure.
Okay. Senator Zoni?
I was just going to ask a question, Madam Chair. I would love to direct this question to Treasurer Arcolani. If there are, what the guiding documents are, you mentioned, like other, is there like a treasurer's, what's the institutional memory of the treasurer's office in paper?
So a lot of the institutional memory of the treasurer's office is, in fact, that we have a 2-year split term, a 2-year split position where we have the AT that is trained for an entire year. That is in large part how like base practices get passed on. However, in addition to the funding policies as articulated in the Constitution and the bylaws that restrict the treasurer's office, we also have, you know, like a 20-some-odd page internal handbook that we use that has everything from login information to best practices information. We also have a series of things within our network drive that are best practices and institutional memory documents. We have records of all of SGA expenditures. I want to say for the last 10 years, what we usually keep our records at, because we are potentially subject to college audit, so we have to keep our records going back in decent ways. So we internally have a decent set of institutional memory. Like I know that I drafted a couple of internal policies this year, and I know Amanda has also developed a really extensive network of policies that will be kept, and those are all kept in our network storage.
Jones, Stallings, Regina, whoever else.
Yeah. Thank you for this feedback. The way we kind of envisioned this bylaw change manifesting is that the document that's on the second page would kind of be distributed to the chairs of the committees and the treasurers, and they would refer to that and they would hold the power of making decisions about funding. So if the next week of this week of reform we clarify that kind of vision in the language, then we should feel good about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for increasing SGA's sustainability efforts and making sure that these policies, like the overarching spirit and goal of these policies is being maintained. I do slightly worry about it potentially being overly restrictive. However, like if you said, we went to reform and had a discussion about you know, the actual implementation in terms of how Dylan has articulated it, or like versus the way that it's being interpreted by some people. I think that would be a really satisfactory way to get to the bottom of this and make sure that we're doing what's best for the world in our small ways.
Senator Stallings?
Just one thing first, to clarify, what did you just say, Senator Jones, about how we were changing language?
Clarify who holds the power in making the final decision about what gets funded. Clear up the as determined by Green Fund committee so that it can't be interpreted such that Green Fund has veto power over the treasurer's office, stuff like that.
So second clarifying question, then if it was to reflect this meeting, if that is possible to be done here, would the Green Fund committee have the possibility of like stop, like the budget is seen as unsustainable, would that budget therefore no longer be considered by the Senate or the Treasurer's Office or whatever committee, or?
If I feel like the Treasurer's Office / the budgetary chair should definitely have the final say. I probably wouldn't feel comfortable letting Green Fund have any kind of veto power on final budgets.
Then I guess what I was gonna say ultimately then, knowing those things, is that perhaps like there could be some kind of function for the Green Fund committee that could be reflected here. Like maybe like, so that whatever body would ultimately consider the budget, whether it be us, the committee, or the treasurer's office, or whoever, it would maybe have Green Fund approval or not, or maybe like a commentary from Green Fund being like, we're concerned about these things. Even if Green Fund doesn't have the ability to stop that budget, they could reflect concerns, like that could be noted whenever the body that would consider it. Just an idea. Because I really think that the Green Fund could have some impact here, and I understand why it should not be the impact that is reflected right now.
Regina?
One, I would like to, because like I've heard people say that Green Fund, we should relook at that body itself if we're putting it so directly in the funding policies, and especially with President Becker's discussion or reform coming after this, which has another idea for something that will further our sustainability goals. I would like to evaluate the state of what our different committees are doing and whether Green Fund or whether it's this new position is going to have that input to what is sustainable, because sustainability can mean a lot of things. And then, what was I going to say? Oh, I was just going to say the phrase "informed by" might be helpful in clarifying this, because that would suggest that, say it is Green Fund is to regularly be, coming up with guidelines or guidance about what it means to be sustainable, and the treasurer's practices can be informed by those policies.
Thank you. We're going to go Miles, Amelia, and then Ashton.
So I want to acknowledge that I wasn't at Reform, and appreciate the people that put thought into this, and I apologize for just presenting thoughts now as opposed to attending Reform when I should have. But in the effort of I also don't look obstinate. I completely agree with the sentiment here, and I think President-elect Logan said informed by, I think sounds like a great way of doing this. I think another option would be to include an additional element within Green Fund's outlining within the bylaws stating that at the beginning of each semester, Green Fund supplies a list of valid alternatives to the budgetary committees. In conjunction with this, saying that Green Fund submits recommendations for sustainable alternatives. I think I think that seems like an approach that wouldn't present any fundamental barriers to funding practices, but would also be in line with student government's commitment to sustainability. I think as Senator Stelling said, further utilizing the subject matter experts that SGA works with on this, in the Green Fund committee, I think is a great idea. I think institutionalizing that sounds good. I think I just have really nitpicky issues with this presentation. I apologize for not being there before to discuss these things, but I think saying as informed by Green Fund committee here, and not presenting any valid funding barriers to the treasurer's office, and then an additional addendum within Green Fund's outline saying that the beginning of each semester they provide a list of viable alternatives, so that as these committees go forward, the members and constituents can have a guiding document by which to further apply the SGA's commitment to sustainability.
Amelia? Can you actually go Ashton and then Ashton?
Yeah, I don't actually have that much to add. I just wanted to echo what everyone else seems to be saying about this being linked to the sustainability coordinator. Elizabeth and I were thinking that maybe a good solution would be to have pretty much what President Becker is saying, sustainability committee and the coordinator decides the definition of sustainability and the treasurer's office implements those policies. And then maybe your coordinator could also sit in on all the budget meetings just to stay informed. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Amelia? Okay, so given that we're starting even to discuss a later item on the agenda, and that the presenter of this has given sentiment that there's going to be changes made, and currently this is on the agenda as a vote, I would love to make a motion to table it and discuss it later.
Motion to table seconded by Senator Jones. All those in favor? Sorry, clickers. The polls are open. That would have been a great time to be point of order. Open up the polls.
Point of order.
Yes.
Clickers?
This is a vote to table this discussion and this vote. We're looking for 3 more. Please, 1 more. You can do it. Pardon? Oh, yeah, okay, so the polls are closed. And with 16 in favor and 1 abstention, that vote passes, so this will be tabled until it is brought to Senate at a later date. Thank you. So now we will move on to okay, now we will move on to agenda item number 8, which is a discussion on J-Rock's role, led by J-Rock Chair Downey.
Thank you. So, hi, I'm Reese Downey. I'm the J-Rock Chair, for those who don't know. So I wanted to continue and hopefully wrap up some discussion that we've had recently about the role of J-Rock, whether that's with hiring positions and what J-Rock could possibly do in further oversight for SGA. So I'm sure you all know this by heart, but I'm going to go ahead and read it anyways, of the J-Rock powers within the Constitution. So this is also included on the application that came out. But the Judicial Review and Oversight Committee shall be responsible for, on request from a student, reviewing and rendering a decision on the constitutionality of bylaw changes, actions by senators or CAB members, and other student government initiatives and actions. Then in powers, the Judicial Review and Oversight Committee shall have the power to strike down unconstitutional actions by the SGA. A decision by the committee may be repealed by a constitutional amendment following standard amendment procedures. And then from the email that was sent out today in the J-Rock Chair application, the J-Rock Chair is responsible for ensuring that SGA leadership is acting ethically and in accordance with the SGA Constitution. So I think in moving forward with the J-Rock position, I have no problem with extending the role of J-Rock Chair in being a part of discussions of whether that's like appointing and hiring cabinet positions and because for one, addressing precedent of J-Rock Chair, when I came into position there was no recorded precedent. There was nothing in the email at all of any sort of record of what happened or any sort of documents on what J-Rock Chair has done in the past. So I think that left things open as to where J-Rock could participate and kind of what the general procedures look like has been fairly open-ended, other than what's already laid out in the Constitution. So I would say that like a J-Rock Chair, I think should just be included in more conversations. Given that J-Rock Chair was only just added to like the agenda for Senate 2 weeks ago, and I would also move or recommend that J-Rock Chair be a part of election board as well. And as that's just a general kind of problem area that I think J-Rock Chair would be a part of, and I think it would send a message that SGA is listening to those grievances that seem to come up almost every semester. So then another thing that I wanted to push and see what people thought of was creating a form to be posted on the SGA website and even pushed out by other senators at the beginning of every semester, a form that students can fill out when they have issues that regard constitutionality. I think this would, because in the Constitution it says, you know, that on request of a student that then the J-Rock will then review the issue, but I don't think students really know how to do that. For one, when is the appropriate time to do that? And I think putting a form out there sends the message that if they have a question that it should just be asked, and that form makes it more seem like there is an open dialogue and it doesn't have to be any sort of like contentious or serious issue. But so having a form, and I think generally just we need people to be like promoting that in creating more visibility of that openness as well. So I wanted to know what other people thought about those movements, if there's anything else that people would like to see of J-Rock Chair, or the committee in general.
College?
Would this also include like a form of like, this just specifically also stating to people of like issues maybe with like cabinet members, like as the last possible like issue?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, so that would, I think a lot of what people are hung up on whether J-Rock should be involved in these sort of things is on constitutionality and what that means of if you need a definition of like whether students need to point out here in the Constitution that this is where I think a problem comes up and then submit it to JROC, but I don't see anywhere defined within the duties and responsibilities or powers that that necessarily is the case. And given that is such an issue and that JROC is supposed to be the impartial body of SGA, I think that makes sense.
Treasurer Glenn.
Yeah, so I wrote an internal policy memo at the beginning of this year, including the JROC chair and hiring decisions, along with the treasurer and the president. Low-level hiring decisions, just to ensure impartiality. And I'm starting to, just in reflection of that, and in response to some of the things that you mentioned, Reese, rethink that decision. In that, I mean, the thing that really brings this up for me is that you mentioned potentially having the Judicial Review and Oversight Committee chair serve on the elections board. And that got me thinking about how, I think a fundamental part of how we have JROC structured, at least now, and of course this is something we can change, is that it's an impartial body that doesn't have prior exposure to the issue areas. So that way it can remain independent. And I'm thinking, like, by including it in an elections board, then how can we trust the JROC chair then to impartially evaluate elections board decisions that they themselves have been a part of making in the first place? But I also think that AC Welch, President Becker, and I have been working on a slight bit of a reform. And to the outline, this is something that Miles had mentioned earlier in discussion of the previous resolution and talking about how things might be presented at different points. And talking about how we can make more clear within our Constitution the different types of things that people can go to the Judicial Review and Oversight Committee for. And I think for us, part of the fundamental problem with the way that section that you read was phrased was it was the order, and that historically it's been interpreted as the constitutionality aspect of the argument being the only thing the JROC is applicable for, and not any broader oversight role, even though that's directly within the name of the committee, which is something that, you know, Miles and Dylan and I had overlooked, and then when we saw that, it kind of hit us in the face just how glaringly obvious that may have been. And this is something that we'll be discussing at Reform this week, but it's something that I can share with you now, with President Becker's in mind. It's just, you had mentioned, and this is something we'll forward along to the chain so that way everyone can read this after the fact. But changing the language from reviewing and rendering a decision on the constitutionality of bylaw changes, actions by senators or cabinet members and other student government initiatives and actions, just literally reordering things to say on request, like reviewing and rendering the decisions on actions by senators or cabinet members, student government initiatives or actions, and the constitutionality of bylaw changes. And for us, I think that, you know, you all may see it differently than us, but I think we saw that as removing that constitutional modifier from those previous clauses and making it more open and more accessible for people to see. Like, it may not be that explicit list of things that we might be able to provide students and be like, these are the types of situations in which you can use the Judicial Review and Oversight Committee. But I think it does, if somebody's just going based on solely our governing documents, it does broaden that scope to be something more in line with what I think the Judicial Review and Oversight Committee actually is and what it was, you know, brought into our Constitution for.
President Becker?
Yeah, to echo Judicial Review and Oversight Committee Chair Downey's point, I think greater accessibility of that position I think is essential. Through my institutional work, this is not an incredibly new position, nor has it been amended since its original introduction within the last 6 years. But I think it's a really valuable element of oversight that SGA doesn't have in any other facet. And to echo Treasurer Galani's point, the increased accessibility means that we need to have a really concrete fundamental understanding of what this committee does. And I think, like Treasurer Galani said, me, Quinn, and Dylan have looked at this bit of the Constitution before and just completely missed, I think, what the intended implications of that are, which we hope to correct with the potential reform that I emailed to the email chain. Just kind of clarify that it does both judicial review and then oversight as well. But yeah, no, I totally agree with the idea of having a form available, so that way it's not kind of guised and you have to go through this constitutional mumbo jumbo to figure out who the person is to contact. but rather that is something we're upfront about. We're not looking to receive them, but we're available to do so if someone needs it necessary. But yeah, no, I agree with this and I like this.
Chair Downey?
Yeah, so I'd just like to echo both of what you were saying in that I think what Treasurer Galani, what you brought up about the constitutional changes and the definitions, that's completely warranted, especially because of what President Becker said, in that given that there's very little precedent or change that has happened within the committee in the past several years. I also would just say that, which this is what brought up the point of the election board, is that this change also needs to be reflected, structurally as well, and that there needs to be some change. And I think JROC should be reactive to what the relevant issues are for the student body and SGA in general. But I totally agree that there could be some potential issues of having an impartial body on the board, but I just thought that was maybe we can talk about this more. Thank you.
I just want to thank JROC Chair Downey for bringing this forward. I think I'm always excited to kind of engage with elements of student government that they don't traditionally do so, and I think seeing you in this role, kind of bringing a discussion topic to Senate, I think is fantastic. And I think having consistent and future communication regarding the way in which SGA conducts its operations, I think is just essential to the maintenance of our governing documents and the functionality of our organization. And so thank you for thinking critically about the ways in which your job operates and bringing this forward as a discussion topic.
Are there any further topics to be added to this discussion? Senator Zerny?
This is a question that I would like to direct to, I guess, Supervisor Gould. There have been some, when we've talked about it before, about the website going down into the summer and getting edited extensively or getting redone or something like that. And just thinking about the feasibility of adding a JROC submission form to the website. I'm curious about the state of those discussions.
The first time that somebody had mentioned taking the website down for the summer was, or at least the first time I had heard of it was a few Senates ago. As for the introduction of a form, just send me content you would like to be on that form. I'll draft the form and can put it on the website under the same section as the Constitution.
Thank you. President Becker?
To that point as well, last year with the treasurers, I redid the funding page of the SGA website, including the addition of several forms, both literal paper forms being uploaded to the website as well as alternate forms. And this is something that can, regardless of the status of the redevelopment of the website, can be done very, very, very simply in no time. So I think that's an incredibly feasible outcome to discuss.
Are there any further points to add to this discussion? JROC Chair Downey, do you have anything else to add?
Just regarding the form, I'll be asking JROC, the committee itself, about some things that we had talked about earlier about what we want to be on the form. So that'll probably come up again later. But yeah, that's all I have to add.
Excuse me, this must be hot. Thank you. All right, thank you for your engagement. We are now going to move on to agenda item 9, which is a discussion on the student environmental coordinator, led by President Beck.
Yeah, so I made a folder. Over spring break, I started going through the SGA Pres email and old joint board documents just to find a list of resolutions that we can keep inside the SGA Google Drive. This is something that was brought to my attention by Treasurer Galani that resolutions are binding indefinitely, and we just don't keep record of our indefinitely binding documents. And so I just tried to categorize those by year. And this is one that popped up that I thought was really interesting just because in Quinn and I's infinite brainstorming sessions, something very similar to this was brought up. And it's something that I think would be a great escalation of SGA's commitment to environmental sustainability institutionally. And so this is literally verbatim the resolution that was brought before joint board in 2007. And reading over the email debate threads that I found and sent to Dylan and Quinn. I think the rationale behind why this didn't pass was just absolutely absurd. The implication being like, I don't know. I don't remember what they were.
There were allegations of impropriety between the environmental coordinator and the administrative coordinator at the time. And that may be influencing the passage of the document based on impacting one staunch advocate's voice in the discussion.
Yes, it was juicy. But anyway, so yeah, so I wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. I think the one kind of issue I have with the consistency of our government documents right now is that the Green Fund chair's role within student government is defined as the chair of the Green Fund, and so is not outlined elsewhere as like a position within SGA. And so I think like a more effective approach to this would be to introduce like, I'd rather call it environmental sustainability coordinator, but introducing that as a position that then heads Green Fund. I think makes more sense. I think this is something that Annabelle and I had discussions about last semester, about including this voice on our budgetary committees so as to ensure, much to the previous resolution's sentiment, that we are funding in a sustainable manner. And I think would be, just a great kind of escalation. I think, while I have the soapbox, my ideal future SGA would be one that has a singular and connected finance committee, from which proposals from various committees can then be presented so as to increase the accessibility of SGA's funding mechanisms. But I think in the meantime, I think further expanding upon the role of the Green Fund co-chair as it currently stands into the form of an environmental sustainability coordinator would be the way to go. So I was using this as like kind of a foundational document on which we can build and discuss what we think the role should be doing. Obviously, I don't think there should be a sunset clause that concludes in May of 2008. But I thought this was a kind of good place to start. So this will be something we'll discuss and reform if this is something you're interested in taking part in the discussion. But yeah, I'm not going to field any questions. We're not voting on this right now. This is just a discussion topic I wanted to bring forward. But if anyone has any questions about this now, I'm open to them.
Thank you. Senator Stallings?
Yeah, I just have a question that's maybe tangential. What is the difference in like making a position cabinet versus non-cabinet? And what are the kind of choices behind that?
So this is the discussion that Quinn and I had last year regarding the role of the tech advisor within cabinet. I think much of the cabinet positions are kind of guided by tradition. You know, as it currently stands, the way positions are is they're 20-hour-a-week positions. We discussed I think there are a few other positions, if any, in SGA that are 20 hours a week and not cabinet. I think the kind of canonical trajectory that we've been throwing around for the last 3 years, during which I've been president and technical advisor, is the escalation of roles from into limbo positions such as the technical advisor, where if it is demonstrated that the position is a 20-hour-a-week position, then it can then potentially make a claim to being cabinet. And so I think this would put that position, this would put this occupational position in that theoretical and temporal position of being considered for cabinet, just because this is like an escalation of what is currently just a committee co-chair into a full-on position within student government that can then be evaluated in the future once this has gone through several semesters and is reviewable for then potentially the inclusion within the cabinet. Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Do you have any further questions?
No.
Sorry.
Senator Aglani?
I was just going to say that I think historically, the way the cabinet is determined is the number of office spaces we have. I'm not joking.
Yep.
In that, like, if we have a history of having 10 cabinet members or 11, depending on like the ace position at any given time, and frankly, I think that the way that we've looked at this is just historically stagnant. In that we have either been bounded by tradition or been like, oh, where's this person's office going to be? Because we don't have just like the physical space in our offices. And I think that that's been horrifyingly limiting to the Student Government Association in terms of how it considers like what I've considered to be these sub-cabinet level positions that work between like 12 and 18 hours every week and are doing very valuable service for the Student Government Association. So going into the future, you people that will be here longer than the 4th years and the 3rd years, will have time to like take deep and clear evaluations of the way that our organization is structured. Highly encourage everyone to look beyond tradition and realize that like what it means to be in cabinet is to say that this is a person who should have a larger seat at the table in terms of discussion when it comes to working with administrators. And that should be our judgment call, in my opinion, of what constitutes a cabinet member, and not to be limited by the fact that we've just had 10 cabinet members for a long time.
Are there any further discussion points? Deepa Murphy?
Just as a note on the office thing, like Miles and Dylan's office and mine and Joshua has space for a 3rd desk in like the back there, like the 2 on the sides. That's something that I talked to Dave about one time, and he seemed like not opposed to throwing an extra computer in there if we actually needed it. So I would say that's not a concern, just as a small thing.
Refund Chair Snodgrass?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I personally feel like I'm already doing a fair number of these things. In my position as refund chair, it's just not outlined in the Constitution that I should be doing those things necessarily. So I do think that this would be more of a change in the title and possibly in addition of a few roles, but essentially like I already feel like the position of refund chair is more than just be a chair of the platform.
President Becker?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely great. I think this is much of the same kind of restructuring I did with the technical advisor in the treasurer's office last year, outlining its like official job documents, the roles that it conducts. You know, I think like the way in which we prioritize sustainability should be reflected in the ways in which we carry out that operation in our governing documents. And so I think I'm super excited that you're working on these things already, and I think that's great. I just think like we should reflect your work in our governing documents as well moving forward to ensure that like the awesome work that you're doing is then continued in future generations, and it's just like limited by like your own personal drive, you know. So I think that's wonderful to hear that's already being done, and I want to make sure that we continue doing that and continue prioritizing like environmental sustainability within the way in which we make our operations.
Thank you. Are there any further discussion points to add? Okay, seeing none, thank you all for your engagement. We can now move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion on the presentation of the endowment led by President Becker.
Yep, so this is something that multiple people from DAR have come to me from Development and Alumni Relations, including Jackie Peavy, who's the current VP of DAR, as well as Mitch Wolf, who many of you may know. And then was recently brought to me by Sarah Motionross from Student Affairs. I think there's there's a lot of confusion regarding the way in which the endowment funds the institution. I think I've heard from a lot of people say like, oh man, I don't feel like I received a $1.7 billion education, you know? And I think I think there's a lot of truth to that, but I think there's also just kind of a lot of miscommunication about the ways in which the endowment is spent and what it's like, what it does. Sarah and Jackie both brought to my attention that the VP of Finance, I think like 4 or 5 years ago, did a presentation in 101 that then talked about how we need to use the endowment in like a financially sustainable manner in order to like preserve intergenerational equity between generations of Grinnellians. There was discussion about attempting to redo one of those things again this year. I think like there's not enough time. I think students are really drained, and like now is not the time to do this. But moving forward, I think there should be more discussions about the way in which the endowment works and the way in which we like operate with it. I'm open to any suggestions you all have. I think like what I've currently suggested to DAR and DSA is that an email go out to the student body just kind of describing how it works, you know, how much we pull from it each year, where like our money comes from, and just kind of beginning to start that conversation rolling into another email in the fall, and then a discussion in 101 with like some catered food to kind of like drive student turnout and kind of like increase students' understandings of the endowment. I know it's something I didn't really fully understand until I started working with DAR and received this presentation like 12 times now. But yeah, no, I'm open to any of your thoughts. I think like this is incredibly interesting, and I think it's something students will benefit greatly from a more thorough and complete understanding. But the way in which that is delivered, I think, is difficult given kind of email fatigue and like lower turnout at events at particular events on campus.
Something that might be an an interesting supplement to this is that there was a student initiative, if I'm not mistaken, that passed last semester regarding restarting the SGA endowment committee and having that information be presented regularly to the endowment committee. So that way we do have at least some subset of students within the Student Government Association who do have pretty consistently that deeper understanding. They could be, supplemented, of course, with these more large-scale presentations like Keith and Nancy. But having that as something that's sort of maybe a potentially regular and ongoing thing might be of value.
So if that committee were to restart, I'm not sure if the DOC is already outlined as a member of that committee, but then would that be something you would suggest that if that committee restarts having the DOC on there to increase our outreach capacity? Because I think there are many members of SGA and of cabinet who understand how these things work, but I think the issue is getting that information from the subject matter experts to the student body as a whole.
Yeah, I think that would be extremely valuable. Just at the very least, having something institutionalized, I think would make it even easier to be able to be brought to the student body, especially if it's able to be a situation where students are acting as the mediator between the administration presenting the information and then to the student body, and having another group of students that may be slightly more informed than your average students, being able to relay that information downward in a more accessible fashion. Because I've been in budget planning committee meetings, I've been in trustee meetings where they're talking about the endowments, and half of the acronyms they use, I have to look up on my phone after the meetings. I have no idea what they're talking about, and I feel just having a structure in place in which the complex financial terminology that's used in the discussion of the endowment can be kind of translated downward for people that don't have as much experience managing $1.7 billion would be really helpful.
And if no one has anything to say right now, feel free to email me as you talk to your constituents or have any further thoughts. I think this is I think really beneficial towards the working relationship with the administration and the student body towards a more cohesive and collective understanding as to how this institution is financed. So that's all I have.
I just wanted to say I would like to express support for everything you're saying. Having more transparency and more information available on these subjects would be a good thing, and I think it should all happen.
Senator Christian?
Having sat on the outreach committee focus groups, I think there's definitely some misinformation just generally about what the endowment is, how it's used. I would also wonder about the possibility of a social media component to sharing information about it. So maybe that's a DOC thing.
Senator Jones?
Also, I think an NSO component might be valuable. I think that's when people aren't totally overwhelmed with things they need to do in the first week and they're kind of more perhaps open to hearing about something. And I think that's different than everything else that gets thrown at you during NSO. So I think it might catch their ears a little bit.
Senator Zuniga?
I would just like to agree with Senator Jones. I think I would have loved to learn about the endowment during NSO. I have yet to know how the heck it works.
President-elect Logan?
As we're thinking about NSO for next year, it's kind of a brilliant idea because I think that the word self-gov gets thrown at new students without giving new students the tools to understand how this institution works so that you can govern it in a meaningful way. So I can imagine this fitting into, yes, definitely, even though it seems like it might be a boring thing, I can see it being really purposeful.
I just really want to quickly say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, financial information about the way that Grinnell College works financially has been something that, for me, has been one of the most rewarding parts about being the SGA treasurer, is being able to have those meetings with people like Keith Archer, who's the CFO, and Nancy Gomes, who's the assistant treasurer of the college, and just be able to see the way that our money and the money of Grinnellians before us is being spent, and the way that that's going to impact the way that Grinnellians, after us, experience this institution and these concepts of intergenerational equity are just really rewarding things. And I feel as much as I am not necessarily one to always be building bridges between members of the community in my various roles on campus, I think that this would really humanize in a lot of respects the way that this institution operates, while also giving students the, you know, ability and knowledge to be able to like critique the way that the institution operates on the financial side.
Senator Nelson?
Yeah, I kind of want to echo that through the lens of the investment discussion that we had a few years ago. I think we were hindered a lot by the administration giving these like very complicated PowerPoints, and I think it really confused students a lot, and it was maybe used as like a way to dissuade people's concerns, and so I'm willing to say that from maybe like a less happy, positive side, but I still approve of this motion.
There are no further discussion points. We can move on. All right, thank you all for your feedback and engagement. We now have Oko/Okno and Lackerja Senator.
Lackeroji!
Oh my god. Yep, so let's get them rolling with Senator Christian.
Hi everyone. I've been really busy with like post-grad stuff and also Head. I hope you all saw the wedding. Woo! But in addition to that, I've been doing a lot of work with outreach focus groups, which has been great. I led a focus group, which is super fun. I've definitely been thinking about the ways that SJ can be more present on social media and also in off-campus spaces. Spoiler alert, people love bathroom readers. Who knew? They're really a popular thing. I've mentioned multiple times. And also thinking more about something Declan mentioned a few weeks ago, which is having like a Facebook alternative to Grinnell Thumbs Down with more SGA engagement. Something that I've been thinking about too. I'm also on the Student Curriculum Committee, Reform Committee, and Harm Reduction Committee when I have time, and this is great. And I'm going to be working more closely with Carrie to plan our Saints Rest Day break. So shout out to Carrie for being on top of that as always. Yeah.
Do we have any questions for Senator Christian? Seeing none, thank you for your hard work. We now have Senator Stallings.
On the subject of Grinnell Thumbs Down, which didn't matter right about here. If you want to talk about that, we can. I should let you guys know, and I think this is the body needs to let know. You need opinions on this, I want your feedback. My plan is when I graduate is to archive the group. So if you have any opinions about that, so if you really have opinions about that, we can talk about it. If you have opinions.
It's cool.
What does archiving do?
I could delete the group and then the history of the group would be gone forever. But I really think Grinnellians in the future can learn from Grinnell Thumbs Down. And I think that we should leave it so that anyone can view it, that it was a member, you can be added as members later, things like that. You just cannot interact with the group in any capacity.
So does that mean that all new interactions with the, like there will be no new content?
No, there will be no new content. However, I do think it would be kind of odd to delete that part of Grinnell's history. But if you have, email me, message me, we can sit down and talk about it. I'd love to. I spent a lot of my semester dealing with that. So besides what I have here, what I've talked about here is like basically the log that I have of the students that I've assisted this semester, like putting them in touch with resources, living off campus, being low income, both, things like that. And what I realized in that is that there is kind of like this subversive network of poor students and first generation students. And if you don't know the right person or are not in the right situation or just like not really involved in Grinnell's community, which there are a lot of students that are like that, I realized that you won't ever get in touch with this information. So I've started to draft a document which is called Surviving Grinnell. It's something that I intend to work on over the summer as well. I think it's really important. But basically it's just about all these resources that I've come to know during my time at Grinnell in these very long 4 years, and all the information I've learned from other people. I think there's lots of room for people that share identities that I don't have to talk about Surviving Grinnell as well. But basically it's just going to be a resource book, a reference book with an index that's going to kind of target any marginalized student and like putting them in touch with resources all in one document. Because I think the bureaucracy that surrounds these resources not just the ones that are listed here, but also all the resources on campus is like actually kind of stifling. So yeah. Something else I realized also, because you may see this and have questions and may want personal help, something else that I've done this semester is work very closely with first generation students and the first generation low income community. Particularly organizing panels, helping. I've met with like 10 or so students about applying to grad school as a first generation student. So if you have any questions in that regard or want to talk further about that, it is something that I will try to like address that I am currently addressing in Mr. Grinnell thing. You absolutely can, including talking about getting graduation cords for first generation students. We currently have cords for legacy students, but not first generation students. Thanks President Becker for pointing that out. I think that's wild, so that's something we're working on too. Yeah, that would be it.
Senator Zernick?
I was just going to ask if you want the shutting down of GTD in minutes / want people's feedback, or do you want that?
Oh yeah, sorry, we should probably, I don't know, I'm not ready for that storm yet. I think that I will be ready, because there are a lot of people that think this is a terrible idea, and I just disagree with them fundamentally. So yeah, I mean, actually, you can include it in your minutes. Like, I feel like everything that's said in here should be included if someone would watch this video. But don't like deny your constituents that information, because maybe there's going to be someone that comes up with an excellent point as to why we shouldn't do that. I just cannot think of one right now.
Just when you're putting your minutes, please don't say like SGA is shutting down Grinnell comes down with Carrie. It was like
Carrie's
Carrie is bad. Not because she's an SGA, but because she's Carrie. So let's not say SGA.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah.
Any further comments or questions? Senator Avery?
Hi, I'd like to express my support for your resource booklet. I think that's a fantastic idea. You are graduating pretty soon, correct? So I'd like to offer my support if you want help in continuity with this, because I would like this to be a thing.
I want help from anyone, and like I will continue to work on this. I feel really strongly about this, mostly because I think that I occupy a strange space in which that I am a low-income first-generation student, but also extremely involved on campus, and that does not happen very often for obvious reasons. So I definitely feel strongly about being involved, and I will continue to write this. But I want help from anyone, and I'm continuing to still outline my first preliminary thoughts. But as soon as the document is ready, I will go ahead and forward it to you guys so that you can watch the changes happen. And if you have something to add or whatever, you can email me. We can talk, Facebook. I don't care. It's gonna be shoddy. I don't really know what I'm doing, but we can make it come together.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Stallings. We now have Senator Zernick.
So I'm the only East Campus senator here tonight, or right now. Throughout the semester, I've sat on Reform Committee and ACE Committee. ACE has had some weird transitions in how that committee functions, but it's been fun also. And then Reform, I got more involved in the second half of the semester. I think it's I'm happy to go to Reform. I think everyone should go to Reform more because we just talk about stuff before it gets to Senate, and there's a lot of, I think, time saving we can do when people show up to Reform. In terms of outreach and talking with constituents, I've done a lot of work figuring out what the best way to communicate is. So weird stuff, including scavenger hunts in my mini minutes for prizes. To get people to read them and stuff like that, and other prizes, and changing the format of my mini minutes to be more newslettery, because what I noticed is that it's easier to get feedback and emails, and people just did not show up to the event that we held last semester, except people who were friends and already were going to tell us that they had problems. So that's been definitely successful in some ways, but I think there's just work to be done. It's difficult to figure out what the best way to communicate is. So I've also had meetings with several individual students who live in my cluster, and then communicated with CAs and the RLC also extensively to work. I helped with Elizabeth's project a little bit, but also the still working. Yeah, we're presenting the poster to D Hall people, so that's just close to my D Hall heart. But yeah, second half of the semester I've definitely done more in terms of ACE training too than Senator who aren't here right now. So I'll just say, I think they don't sit on any committee. I'm not sure what committees they're on, but they do go to committee and they've been great and helpful and we've been a good team in terms of outreach.
Awesome. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Seeing none, we can move on. Thank you, Senator Zernig. Senator Nieto is not here, and neither is Senator Goldhammer. So we can move on to the cabinet reports. AC Welch.
I burnt my tongue yesterday. It's pretty bad. And please come to reform at 7 on Thursday. Please.
Viva Murphy.
How'd you burn your tongue?
So I was
You don't have to
making,
talk about it.
I was making Annie's mac and cheese, and I was going to taste it to see, I was going to see if it was like the right level of squishiness, and there was like a lot of water hiding in the shells that splashed onto my tongue. So be careful out there.
Be on yourself. Any other questions? Senator Wallinger?
Can you talk about the meeting? Can you talk about the meeting with Angela Joe?
Yes. So we met with just Angela Booth this week. Grinnell was out of town for like a meeting with trustees or something. We talked about the recent alum trustee student initiative. Riley brought that up. We talked about basically how we should go about making that happen. Angela encouraged us to do it and like laid out some like processes for getting that done with the board. Basically, we should send a letter talking about student support for it. It might be a good idea. We talked a bit about setting up a meeting between Million Hoodies leadership and Kington, which we're going to be doing, I believe, assuming that they're still interested. And then we also talked about the mental health task force report, which came out, and like sort of the administration's, at least from Angela's perspective, like plan for addressing the findings of that report. She talked a lot about how they have done already. For example, in the past like 4 years, they've tripled the money going to mental health services, developed a partnership with University of Iowa, I believe, and started the telepsych program and group counseling. So those are all good things to come out of that task force. And then she talked like more about the like move in higher education in general, but specifically at Grinnell, or the goal at Grinnell of educating and like caring for sort of the whole student, not being able to separate academics from students' health and wellness.
Senator Wallinger?
Did they also discuss more about like construction or like the progress on that?
No.
Are there any further questions?
If you have more questions about that, we could talk after.
Okay. Seeing none, we can move on to Treasurer Kalani.
Yeah, I apologize. My reports these last couple of weeks have been short and non-descriptive. I've had some sciatica, which is just a pinched nerve in the lower back, which has been causing me to, experience pain. So I've been kind of shirking my SGA responsibilities a little bit in order to be meeting my, academic need and personal physical needs. But this week I do have something new that's not just reformatted from my previous reports, which is the Student Financial Support and Success Advisory Task Force Advisory Committee, which I sit on. I'm one of 2 current students that's on that committee, along with Tim Grinnell. And basically, it is a really, really interesting committee, talking about ways and it involves all aspects of student financial life, from admissions, so Brad Lindbergh's on the committee, to post-grad life with Mark Peltz. There are professors on the committee, there are alum on the committee, there are a series of trustees that serve on the actual task force, because this is a board-appointed task force. And basically what we talked about in the last meeting was how Grinnell develops its not comprehensive fee, but the cost of attendance. in terms of looking at financial aid information and how much like the breakdown is between how much students are expected to pay, how much loans are expected to cover, how much work is expected to cover, and how much parents are supposed to be able to cover, and talking about different ways in which Grinnell might be able to mitigate those costs. We generally speaking use a methodology which is better than the federal methodology. We use the institutional methodology, which is run by, if I'm not mistaken, the College Board, and our very own Brad Lindbergh is instrumental in helping to develop and keep updated. It's very interesting in just talking about these different ways in which we have at times served our community in terms especially of low-income students differently than we do now, and how those methods might be more impactful. Like, for example, considering healthcare in our comprehensive fee, and our not comprehensive fee, but total cost of admissions when we're calculating financial aid, or bringing back potential waivers for the summer employment expectation, which is about $2,500 for students on financial aid. And so it's a really interesting thing. I'm sure that anyone on the committee would be willing to talk to you about it. So Brad Lindbergh, Mark Peltz, there are a couple of professors whose names escape me, a couple of administrators, again, whose names escape me, but I can get back to you on those if you want. And then myself and Tim Bernazza, the two students. Grace Lloyd is one of the alumni. And when the trustees are in town, if you run into any of them, feel free to ask them about it, because I'm sure they'll be getting a nice update from the task force.
Sorry, Linda. Are there any questions regarding Treasurer Ercolani's report? Or if anyone wants to follow up with him for feedback, please do. Important stuff. We are going to backtrack to DOC Gumijala because AC Welch has something to add.
Ciala just wanted you to email her if you have any questions about it.
Thank you. Now to AT Weber.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. If anyone has any questions regarding the report?
I would just like to emphasize the last point. I put it in all caps, and there's a link to things, so I hope you noticed it. But I'm using a scheduling system now. I think I talked to Senator Zernig about this. This is just to make things more streamlined and organized for me, especially for credit card purchases. So if you can schedule, office hours are a little bit less important, but definitely for credit card purchases, if you can schedule ahead of time, tell your friends to schedule ahead of time. Also, if you want to schedule office hours, that would be great. We would love that. But yeah, so just keep that in mind. Would highly encourage other people to do things like that. Scheduling is good. So yeah, that's it. That's all I've got.
Senator Zernig?
Oh, I was just going to say that Lauren and I use this to schedule an appointment with Amanda, and it's a really cool website. It's like a cool service. I don't know.
TA Wolf?
And the funding page of the website has been updated, so people are directed to book a time with Amanda to discuss credit card purchases instead of filling out another form.
Further questions or anything you'd like to add, AT Weber?
No.
Okay, thank you. Deep Bomber?
Sorry I was late. Today's the last time. I'm at a student's dinner. The Gurge is going to be looking for artwork for the cover and section title pages, so keep an eye out for that.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we can now move on to President Becker.
So aside from what's here, like we mentioned earlier, Quinn, Dylan, and I put together a J-Rock reform right before Senate, so that's a last minute addition. And as Senator Stallings mentioned, we're collaborating on getting boards for first-gen students who want to wear them during commencement. I was flipping through some of my old commencement booklet deals and noticed that they had support for not first-gen boards, and so I reached out to Chaplain Shorb, and we'll try and get in touch with her early this week so we can get those purchased and then institutionalized in the future. And I think
Yeah, no, this kind of sums up stuff. I think I'm gonna put together like a big old list of things I think SGA should do in the future, and just deliver like a real thick presentation on our final Senate next week. Yeah, no, that's our yeah, whatever.
Any comments or questions? Senator Collinger?
Can you explain discuss the new policy stuff with Jen Jacobson, and then also like the memorial?
Yeah, so an all-campus email about the memorial should be going out soon. I sent an email to 2019 and posted on 2019. SGA got yellow tulip pins to remember Jack's time at Grinnell that will then be distributed to seniors to wear on their gowns if they would like to do so for commencement. And the Jack Memorial that will be unveiled the Saturday before commencement has been fully funded now, which is wonderful to hear. So that will be unveiled the Saturday the 18th at a service that will be announced in the all-campus email. The new policy stuff, student affairs saw the student travel policy and the institutional memory policies that I wrote earlier this year, and want to write one for SHIC. The Jen Jacobson and Emily Howe, in conjunction with Bailey Asbury in the wellness and Title IX offices respectively, had some concerns about like the lack of communication between those offices and SHIC, as well as the members of SHIC's. This is their words, that they were concerned about a fundamental lack of training that those people were having, like, and that SHIC was touting as like a one-stop shop for all these needs, but the advocates received significantly more institutional training in order to render decisions on things in a way that they were concerned about. So they sent me some recommendations for another policy that I will then be reviewing early this week. Just in terms of making sure that all members of SHIC are adequately trained in order to deliver and render decisions on topics and notions that are brought to them, as well as ensuring that the college's internal messaging is consistent, whether it's from the advocates, or sorry, not the advocates, I mean the peer educators and SHIC, just to make sure that like we as SGA as a potentially liable organization are equipping the students that we employ to deliver safe and correct information. So that's kind of where that notion needs to kind of be reviewed and discussed. But yeah.
Treasurer Kalani?
Something from VPSA Tumbu is just to talk about the fact that let's make sure that we keep people from SHIC involved in these conversations moving forward, so that way they can feel like their voice is being heard and they can accurately represent what SHIC's mission and purpose is when these discussions are happening at this weird administrative level, which doesn't actually interact with them as an organization, person to person.
Senator Nelson?
Yeah, I was going to essentially say that, but also ask a little bit more information on what kind of things he's talking about the administration of people.
To that point, this was a discussion we had first week of spring break, and I don't have that information on me. This was just recently brought back to my attention by an email that they sent that I haven't looked at yet, but I hadn't seen that and intended to look at it before this meeting. But yeah, and to VPSA Tuber's point, like I'm certainly not rendering any decisions on what we should or should not do right now. This is very much like an information gathering point. Like concerns have been expressed to me, and then I will then continue to evaluate those concerns as I've done for like all of our potential liability issues that we've encountered this year. And so yeah, so I'm not looking to just like kind of like just strike while the fire's hot, you know, just like trying to make sure that I have all the information that I can gather and then kind of move forward from there. So I think like once I recognize their concerns, I'll be able to reach out to SHIC. More than likely, this is just probably not something I'm going to be able to resolve in the next 3 weeks. This will probably be something that I'll have to be like continue upon. I'll try and get as much information as I can before then. So yeah, so rest assured, I will be sure to contact everyone and make sure I have everyone's thoughts and ideas put together before I send the new policy. But yeah.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments or questions, we can now move on to VPSA Tombo's report. Treasurer Kalani.
So 2 points for Khadijah. First is that the lighting committee went it split into groups and did some walkarounds around campus. But if there are areas where there is lighting that's out, or there are really dark areas that don't have lighting systems put into place that you find on campus, feel free to email her with those locations, so that way the committee can scope them out and get that lighting put in, so that way when we start up again in the fall, we can have more adequate lighting on campus. Second was Khadijah's in the process of addressing the rash of recent firings in dining services, especially in the marketplace. And has scheduled meetings with marketplace administrators and management to discuss why these are happening and ways that we can prevent the issue, especially because it's at this weird intersection of academics and like social life and also work on and labor on campus. So if you want to tell your constituents, and if there's anyone who has been fired or impacted by these terminations, feel free to direct them to Khadijah, so that way she can talk to them before these meetings to get a better handle on what's going on and get a fuller grasp of the situation as she goes into those meetings and is advocating for student workers.
Thank you. President Becker.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, please make sure to reach out to the BPSA regarding that important announcement. Now we can move on to Contra Christensen.
Yeah, I unfortunately wasn't at the concert on Friday. Finn and Victoria completely led the whole night as kind of a practice round, and also just because I couldn't be there. And I haven't had a chance to talk to them too much about it. Apparently it wasn't great attendance, but other than that I haven't heard anything that's not good. What else? Reggaeton Grinnell was really fun. I don't know, I was there for a bit. And what else have I been doing? I've been meeting with Finn and Victoria pretty regularly to go over just different aspects of the responsibilities of this position, and been advising Finn as he starts to reach out to artists and consider bookings for next semester. This Friday is our last concert. It's Sorry We're Late is opening for Blizzard Babies and Girl K. It's going to be really fun. And then the next day is the Grinnellian, of course. So just keep all that in mind. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions about anything.
Comments or questions? All right, thank you very much. So this is Chair Totoma. Any questions, comments? Senator Cerny?
A long time ago, like last semester, you mentioned, or this might have been inside of this might have been just a conversation with you, like a comprehensive list of student groups and service projects and things like that, and like institutionalization of that, and just thinking about the fact that you're graduating and going to work at Twitter. What? That's kind of cool. But where is that? What does that look like? And how do you talk to Eric?
I've been talking to Eric every week. We have our stat calls scheduled for Wednesdays, but he travels a lot, so sometimes we move around. For the groups, I do have a working list, but students don't respond to emails, so my struggle is whether or not I remove the group, pending, let's say they haven't been active for a semester, and someone's abroad and they just come back. I've taken the view that I should be strict with the list, and so the list is really short right now. If you didn't respond to either org fair or any of the emails, if you didn't attend Amanda's funding workshop, you're not an active student group. And as they come to me on a case-by-case basis, I reinstate them. And so that's how it's working currently. The way that it was,
Senator Avely?
Hi, yeah, I wanted to ask about Fogfest. So I got a bunch of questions while I was tabling as to where the money's actually going.
Yes. So with Fogfest, once all the donations are in, the priority is to get the P-card numbers to dining because they take a while to organize it. Then I bring a bunch of student, like community service organizations to Senate, and we decide which one we think this year should get them. But I just wanted to jump ahead because last semester we had problems with dining services and getting the P-card numbers and like cleaning the whole because the P-card reader wasn't working as well. That is coming up on the next student Senate.
Thank you.
Senator Jones?
I also have a couple of questions about Fogfest that I got from students while tabling. The first is like, we talk about how it's a meal that they're donating from that week that we're tabling. And I imagine like it takes a long time for it to process, and so I'm trying to retroactively like do that. So like, can they just like swipe people if they don't have a meal? Like, how does that work? Okay, we don't know. The second question is, everybody was like, we should do this every week. So that seems extreme, but is there a possibility for doing the podcast charity fundraising thing more often than just once a semester?
I'll be completely honest with you, dining services are very difficult to get through to. One, the only truth be told, they don't take the whole meal. The whole meal is $14. I am not at liberty to disclose how much they actually donate because they don't want that information. But they are difficult to work with. So doing Fogfest more than once a semester would be incredibly, like, we could try, but I think historically it's been quite difficult to get them to do it even more than one, like twice a year.
Just a reminder, we have 4 minutes left and we still have one cabinet report to get to. So Senator Vega.
But you can ask me anything about Fogfest, please just come ask me after.
Senator Stallings.
So, yes, just for clarification, like who or what offices that you can't share that information?
Well, I'm
Who do I directly email to?
Oh, okay. I will send it to you.
Okay, anything left to add? Thank you. H.J. Satchel.
So my biggest thing is law, so we finally figured that out, so make sure you come.
Any questions? Senator Vega.
What is the meeting place at What's Committee this week? You know?
It's gonna be the same, but JRC 26.
Tuesday at 4.
Okay, that time and location will be in the meeting minutes. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Motion to end by President Becker, seconded by Senator Zernig. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. All those abstaining don't say nothing, because we done.